When I arrived at the lawyer's office, my daughter said, "I'll take the ranch and $43 million. She can go back to her shed." She said it like I was nothing, like I had no rights, no say, no worth. And then she smirked, leaning back in her chair as though she had already won. The lawyer's face stayed calm, but I saw something flicker in his eyes. He slid a document across the polished oak table toward me. His voice was steady, almost too steady, as he said, "Activate it now." I touched the paper with trembling hands. My daughter's smirk vanished. Her face turned pale. Her lips parted in shock as she leaned forward to see what it was. Because written in bold letters on the front page were words that made her blood drain from her face. "Last will and testament, with secret addendum." She whispered, "No, no, you didn't." But I had. And that's when everything changed. Hello everyone, my name is Margaret Johnson. I'm speaking to you from Texas, USA. I'm 74 years old, and before I take you deeper into this story, let me ask you something. Please make sure to like, subscribe, and click the notification button so you won't miss the rest of this story and many others I'll be sharing. And let me know in the comments from which part of the country you're watching. I truly want to know. Now let me take you back to where it all began. It was 2 years before that shocking day in the lawyer's office. Life on the ranch was not easy, but it was mine. My late husband, George, and I had built it from nothing. I remembered the first wooden fence he nailed with his own hands, the dusty boots by the door, the nights we sat under the stars dreaming about the future. When he passed away, the ranch became more than just land. It became my last piece of him. But my daughter Linda didn't see it that way. She always wanted more, more, more. Money was never enough. Luxury was her language. She would come to visit, not to see me, but to calculate. She looked at the land not as home, but as dollars stacked high. At first I ignored it. She was my daughter, after all. Blood is blood. I thought maybe she would soften with time. But each visit grew sharper, colder. She would ask questions like, "How much is this ranch worth now, Mother? Have you thought of selling? You don't need all this space, do you?" Her smile was always forced, her eyes scanning everything like a vulture circling its prey. I started noticing things missing. Family jewelry, George's pocket watch, even silverware. When I asked her, she would laugh it off, saying I was old and forgetful. That hurt, because deep down I knew the truth. The turning point came one stormy evening. I had just finished mending a broken fence when Linda arrived unannounced, her car tires splashing mud up the driveway. She didn't even bother to greet me before storming inside. She had papers in her hand and fury in her eyes. "Sign this," she demanded, slamming the documents onto the kitchen table. When I looked at them, my stomach dropped. It was a transfer of property rights. My ranch, my land, my everything, into her name. I looked up at her, shocked. "Linda, what is this?" Her lips curled into a smile I didn't recognize. "It's for your own good, Mother. You can't take care of this place anymore. You belong in a smaller place, a shed maybe. Let me handle the business. You'll thank me later." That was the night I realized my daughter wasn't just greedy. She was dangerous. But I didn't sign. Instead, I hid the papers and drove to see Mr. Douglas, our family lawyer, the very next morning. Mr. Douglas had been George's friend for decades. He looked at the papers, sighed heavily, and said, "Margaret, it's worse than I thought. She's planning to take everything." My heart broke. But he leaned in and whispered, "Don't worry. I have a plan. But you must trust me." And so the secret plan began. But before I could tell you what that plan was, something happened that shook me to my very core. I didn't sleep that night after leaving Mr. Douglas's office. My hands shook as I locked every door in the ranch house and pulled the curtains shut. The storm outside rattled the windows, but the storm in my chest was worse. My own daughter, my flesh and blood, was plotting against me. The next morning I woke up to the smell of smoke. At first I thought it was from the old fireplace, but when I opened the back door I froze. One of the barns was on fire. Flames licked the sky, crackling as they devoured the wood and hay inside. I ran, screaming for help, grabbing the garden hose, but it was useless against the roaring fire. By the time the fire department arrived, the barn was gone. Ashes and cinders where George and I had stored decades of hard work. When the fire chief pulled me aside, his expression was troubled. "Ma'am, this was no accident. Someone poured gasoline." It was arson. My legs nearly gave out beneath me, and I knew in my heart who had done it. That evening Linda showed up. Her perfume entered the room before she did, her high heels clicking against the old wooden floor. She didn't even mention the barn. Instead, she placed her designer bag on the counter and said coldly, "Mother, the offer still stands. Sign the papers, and I'll take care of everything. You're too old to handle disasters like this." I looked her straight in the eye. "Did you do this, Linda? Did you burn your father's barn?" Her lips curled, not in denial, not in guilt, but in something far worse, satisfaction. "What does it matter who did it? You can't keep this ranch forever. You either give it up willingly, or life will keep reminding you that you don't belong here anymore." Tears stung my eyes, but I refused to let her see me break. I walked away, but inside something hardened. She had crossed the line. The very next morning, I went to see Mr. Douglas again. His office smelled of leather and old books, the kind of place that reminded you of loyalty and truth. I told him everything: the fire, her visit, her threats. He listened quietly, then opened a thick folder from his desk drawer. Inside was a document I had never seen before. My name was on it, signed in my handwriting from years ago. "Margaret," he said, "when George was alive, he prepared something for you. A safeguard." He suspected Linda's greed might one day surface. "This document is the addendum to your will, and it changes everything." I stared at him, speechless. He explained, "If Linda ever attempts to take what isn't hers, if she threatens you, manipulates you, or uses force, this paper activates. It ensures that she gets nothing. Not the ranch, not the money, not even a keepsake. Instead, everything goes to you and then to the charity George chose, an orphanage for children. You only need to sign to activate it." My breath caught. George, my sweet George. Even after death, he was protecting me. But before I could put pen to paper, Mr. Douglas leaned closer. His voice dropped to a whisper. "Margaret, you must be careful. If Linda finds out about this document before the right time, she might do worse than burn a barn." I nodded, my heart pounding. That was when I realized. This was no longer just about property. This was a battle for survival. For the next few weeks, I pretended to be weaker than I was. I let Linda believe I was slipping, that she was winning. She visited often, circling like a hawk, her words dripping with fake sweetness. I let her think I was almost ready to give in. But at night, I whispered to George's memory, "I'll protect what we built. I won't let her destroy it." And then one evening, something happened that pushed everything over the edge. I had just finished locking up the chicken coop when I heard footsteps behind me. Before I could turn, a strong hand shoved me hard. I stumbled, falling onto the dirt. My heart thudded as I looked up, into the cold, merciless eyes of my own daughter. She stood over me, her lips twisted. "You're in my way, Mother. You've always been in my way. Tonight that changes." I lay on the ground, my palms scraped against the gravel, my chest rising and falling in uneven bursts. The night air was cold, but the chill that ran through me came not from the wind, but from the icy look in Linda's eyes. My own daughter, my flesh and blood, stood over me with a look of hatred so deep it made my heart ache. "Linda," I whispered, struggling to push myself up. "What are you doing? You're my daughter." She didn't blink. Her voice was sharp like the crack of a whip. "You've stood in my way for too long, Mother. You think this land belongs to you forever? You think you can cling to it while I rot in scraps? No. Tonight I take what's mine." I tried to stand, but she shoved me back down with her heel pressed hard against my shoulder. I gasped. She leaned closer, and the smell of her expensive perfume mixed with the stench of betrayal in the night air. "You're weak. Old. Useless," she hissed. "Sign the papers or I'll make sure you don't wake up tomorrow." For a moment I thought my heart would stop. My own child, my baby girl whom I had rocked to sleep, whose scraped knees I had kissed, whose birthdays I had celebrated, was threatening my very life. But then something stirred in me. Fear gave way to fire. I looked straight into her eyes and whispered, "I will never give you this land, Linda. Not by force, not by papers, not by threats. You'll have to kill me first." Her lips curled into a cruel smile. "That can be arranged." She raised her hand as if to strike me, but just then, The headlights of a truck flashed down the dirt road. Linda froze. The sound of tires crunching on gravel grew louder. She stepped back quickly, her face twisting with frustration. It was old Tom, my ranch hand. He pulled up in his rusty pickup, jumped out and called, "Mrs. Johnson? You all right out here?" Linda's expression changed instantly. She plastered on a fake smile, bent down to grab my arm, and pulled me up like she was helping me. "Oh, she's fine, Tom. Just tripped, didn't you, Mother?" I forced myself to nod, though my body shook. Tom frowned, clearly unconvinced, but didn't press further. Linda kissed my cheek lightly and whispered in my ear, "This isn't over. Not by a long shot." Then she strolled back to her car, her heels clicking against the gravel, and drove away into the night. I stood there trembling as Tom helped me inside. But in my heart I knew one thing. This had gone far beyond greed. Linda wasn't going to stop. She would keep coming until either she had everything or I had nothing. The next morning I went back to Mr. Douglas. His office, lined with shelves of thick legal books, felt like the only safe place left in the world. I told him everything. His face grew pale then stern. "Margaret," he said firmly, "you cannot stay on that ranch alone anymore. It's not safe. She's crossed into dangerous territory." "I can't leave, Mr. Douglas," I whispered. "This land is all I have left of George. If I leave, she wins." He tapped his fingers on the desk, deep in thought. Then he slid the same document across to me again, the one George had prepared, the secret addendum. "Then we use this. But we have to be strategic. If we activate it too early, she'll find another way to fight. If we wait too long, she may harm you. Timing is everything." I nodded, clutching the paper with trembling hands. It felt heavy, not just with ink and signatures, but with George's foresight, his love, his protection. For weeks I lived with one eye open. Linda's visits grew stranger, more aggressive. Sometimes she would arrive uninvited, pacing through the house as if it already belonged to her. Other times she would stand silently on the porch, just watching, her eyes cold and calculating. One afternoon I caught her in my bedroom rifling through drawers. When I confronted her, she smiled and said she was looking for old family photos. But I knew the truth. She was hunting for the will. The highs and lows of those days nearly broke me. One moment I would sit on the porch, rocking in my chair, clutching George's photo and finding comfort in his memory. The next moment Linda's shadow would fall across my doorway, and dread would coil in my stomach like a snake. But then came the night that changed everything again. It was late, and I had just blown out the lamp in the living room when I heard a noise outside. At first I thought it was the wind, but then came the distinct sound of footsteps on the porch. Slow, heavy, deliberate. My heart pounded. I grabbed the shotgun George had left by the fireplace, more for comfort than for use, and crept to the window. There she was, Linda. But she wasn't alone. Two men stood beside her, tall and broad, with shadows covering their faces. One carried a crowbar. The other held something long and sharp, maybe a knife. I froze. My breath caught in my throat. This wasn't just intimidation anymore. This was an attack. Linda's voice, low but clear, carried through the glass. "Remember, boys. No mistakes. We get her to sign, and then we're done. Quick and easy." Quick and easy. Those words cut into me like a blade. My daughter wasn't just willing to harm me. She had hired men to do it. I stepped back from the window, my knees weak. My mind raced. Should I call the police? Should I run? Should I fight? Before I could decide, the doorknob rattled. Then came the loud crash of the crowbar hitting the door. Bang, bang. Each strike echoed through the house, shaking the walls, shaking my soul. I clutched the shotgun tighter, whispering a prayer under my breath. And then, with one final slam, the door burst open. The men stepped inside. And Linda followed, her smirk wide and triumphant. The door crashed to the floor, splinters scattering across the wooden planks like shattered bones. My heart thundered in my chest as the two men stepped inside. They were strangers, rough and mean-looking, with tattoos creeping up their arms and shadows hiding half their faces. One carried the crowbar, the other gripped a knife that glinted under the dim porch light. And then came Linda, strutting in behind them like a queen leading her soldiers. She wore that same cruel smirk, The one that twisted my stomach every time I saw it. "Mother," she said sweetly, her voice dripping with poison. "This is your last chance. Sign the papers, hand everything over, and you won't get hurt. Be smart about this." My hands trembled, but I kept the shotgun steady, pointing it straight at her chest. "Get out of my house, Linda. You and those thugs of yours." The two men laughed, low and mocking. One of them spat on the floor. "Lady, put that thing down before you hurt yourself." But I didn't lower it. I stood tall even though my knees shook. "This land isn't yours, Linda. It never will be." Her eyes narrowed. "You think you're strong, but you're not. You're an old woman living in a fantasy. I will have this ranch, and I will have every cent. You can either hand it over, or be buried under it." The man with the crowbar took a step forward. My finger twitched on the trigger, and I shouted, "One more step and I'll shoot." The house went silent. Even the wind outside seemed to hold its breath. For the first time, I saw doubt flicker in Linda's eyes. She hadn't expected me to fight back. But then her face hardened again. "You don't have the guts." Before she could say another word, red and blue lights flashed through the broken doorway. Sirens wailed in the distance, growing louder, closer. The men swore under their breath. "Cops." Linda spun around, her face pale. "What? How?" That's when Tom appeared, standing behind the flashing lights of his truck, a phone still clutched in his hand. He'd called the sheriff. "Linda Johnson," the sheriff's voice boomed from outside. "Step away from your mother and drop whatever you're carrying." The two men panicked, bolting for the back door, their heavy boots thudding against the floorboards. Linda stood frozen, torn between running after them and facing what she had done. "Linda!" the sheriff barked again. Now, for a second, I thought she would finally surrender. But instead, she turned, her eyes burning with fury, and pointed at me. "This isn't over, Mother. You'll regret this." Then she dashed through the kitchen door, vanishing into the night. The sheriff's men stormed the house seconds later, flashlights slicing through the darkness. They found me standing there, shotgun still in my hands, my body trembling like a leaf. "Mrs. Johnson," the sheriff said gently, lowering his weapon. "Are you all right?" I nodded weakly, though tears stung my eyes. She was going to kill me. My own daughter. Tom stepped inside, his face full of worry. "I saw them going in, Mrs. Johnson. I couldn't let them hurt you. Thank the Lord I called in time." The sheriff rested a hand on my shoulder. "We'll find her. But you need to stay somewhere safe for now. She's dangerous." As they searched the house for signs of the intruders, I sank into George's old chair, clutching the shotgun to my chest. My mind replayed every word, every threat, every cold look from Linda. I realized then that this wasn't just about the ranch anymore. It wasn't even about the money. This was about survival. And though the sheriff promised they would catch her, deep down, I knew Linda wasn't finished. She would come back, more determined, more ruthless. And when she did, I had to be ready. Because next time, she wouldn't bring just two men and a crowbar. Next time she'd bring war. The night after Linda broke into my house with those men, I barely slept. Every creak in the floorboards, every rustle of the wind against the shutters made me jump. I kept the shotgun across my lap and George's picture clutched to my chest. I had never felt so betrayed, so raw. How does a mother come to terms with the fact that her child wants her dead? By sunrise, the sheriff's deputies were gone, and Tom was back at the ranch, checking the broken door. He shook his head, hammer in one hand, nails in the other. "Mrs. Johnson, I'll fix this, but I can't fix the hurt she's put in your heart." I swallowed hard. "Tom. She was my baby. My Linda. I carried her in my arms, I sang her to sleep. How did it come to this?" Tom didn't answer. Maybe there was no answer. Later that morning, Mr. Douglas called. His voice was firm, businesslike. "Margaret, I heard what happened. You can't ignore this any longer. It's time to sign the activation papers. If Linda thinks she can force you, we'll show her she has no claim." My hand trembled around the phone. "I'm ready." But before I could drive to his office, the sheriff stopped by again. He stepped onto the porch, hat in hand, his face grave. "We searched all night," he said. "Linda's gone. The men she was with, career criminals. We'll issue warrants, but Margaret, you should know if she's desperate. She might come back harder. I nodded, though my chest tightened. She wasn't going to give up. Not Linda. That afternoon, I packed a small bag and locked up the ranch house. I left Tom to watch over the animals while I drove into town to Mr. Douglas's office. The building was old, its walls lined with heavy books that smelled of dust and wisdom. Mr. Douglas stood waiting, a thick folder on his desk. Margaret, he said gently, sit down. This is the moment George prepared you for. I sat, my heart pounding. He opened the folder and slid the paper across the table. My name was at the top, bold and clear. By signing this, he explained, you strip Linda of all claims. She cannot inherit, she cannot sue, she cannot manipulate. Everything remains yours until you choose otherwise. And upon your passing, it goes directly to the charity George selected. I held the pen. For a moment I hesitated. My hand shook, not from doubt about the ranch, but from the pain of what this meant. Signing that paper meant cutting off my daughter forever. It meant admitting she was lost to greed. Tears blurred my vision. George, I whispered, I wish you were here to see this, to hold my hand through it. Then with a deep breath I signed. Mr. Douglas stamped it, sealed it, and looked at me with steady eyes. It's done. You're safe now, Margaret. Legally, she has no power. But as I walked out of his office, my chest still felt heavy, because laws and papers couldn't shield me from Linda's hatred. And sure enough, that evening the war escalated. I was driving back to the ranch when I noticed a black SUV in my rearview mirror. It followed me closely, too closely. My stomach dropped. I pressed the gas harder, but the SUV stayed right behind me, its headlights glaring into my mirrors. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tight my knuckles turned white. I turned left toward the ranch road, but the SUV turned too. My breath quickened. Then suddenly it sped up. The engine roared as it swerved dangerously close, its bumper nearly hitting mine. I screamed, jerking the wheel, the car skidding on the dirt road. Dear Lord, no, I whispered. The SUV rammed the back of my car once, hard enough to jolt me forward. My head smacked the steering wheel, but I didn't stop. I pressed harder on the gas, the tires spitting gravel as I tore down the road toward the ranch. Another hit. The sound of metal crunching echoed in my ears. My car shook violently, but I held on. Finally, the ranch lights appeared in the distance. Tom's truck was parked near the barn. I laid on the horn, hoping he'd hear. The SUV rammed me one last time before suddenly peeling off into the trees. I lost control and slammed into the fence post at the edge of the property. The airbags burst open, the smell of smoke and burned rubber filling the air. I sat there dazed, my chest heaving. Tom came running, shouting, Mrs. Johnson! Margaret! Are you hurt? I stumbled out of the car, shaking, clutching my chest. It was her, Tom. It had to be Linda. She's trying to kill me. He helped me inside, his hand steady on my shoulders. You need protection, ma'am. This is getting out of hand. You can't fight this alone. But even as he spoke, headlights flared again in the distance. Another car approached, fast, too fast. My heart stopped. Tom grabbed his rifle from the wall and stepped onto the porch, aiming into the night. Stay inside, Mrs. Johnson. I peeked through the window, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might burst. The car screeched to a stop at the end of the driveway. The door opened slowly. For a terrifying second, I thought it was Linda. But it wasn't. It was a man I didn't recognize, tall and thin, with a scar running across his cheek. He stepped out, raised his hands in the air, and shouted, I just want to talk. Tom shouted back, You're on private property. State your business or leave. The man didn't move closer, but his voice carried through the night. I work for Linda, but I ain't like the others. She's crossed a line, and I won't follow her no more. Tom glanced back at me, his brow furrowed. Should I run him off? But something in the man's voice made me pause. He didn't sound like he came to hurt me. He sounded desperate. I stepped onto the porch, my knees shaking. What do you want? I called out. The man lowered his hands slowly. To warn you, she ain't giving up. Tonight was just the start. She's planning something bigger, something worse. And if you don't stop her, she'll burn this whole place down, with you in it. The night air went cold. My blood turned to ice. Tom aimed his rifle tighter. Why should we believe you? The man looked straight at me, his eyes heavy with regret. Because I've done bad things for her. But even I wouldn't go as far as what she's planning next. I swallowed hard. My voice cracked when I asked, what is she planning? The man's answer made my knees nearly buckle. She hired a crew. Not just thugs this time. Profissionals. They're coming here in 3 nights. Their job is simple, make sure you're gone. For good. The scarred man's words rang in my ears long after they left his mouth. 3 nights, make sure you're gone. For good. My knees went weak, and I had to grip the porch railing just to stay upright. Tom stepped closer to him, rifle still aimed steady. You expect us to take your word for it? You could be setting us up. The man shook his head, his scar twisting as he frowned. No. I'm done with her. I thought it was about money. Just money. But your daughter. She doesn't care who she destroys. I can't follow her into murder. I won't. I found my voice, shaky but clear. Why warn me at all? His eyes softened for just a moment. Because I had a mama once too. She raised me alone, worked herself to the bone for me. I lost her young, and I'd give anything to have her back. Seeing what Linda's doing, it makes me sick. You don't deserve this. A lump formed in my throat. My own daughter was plotting my end, and here was a stranger, one of her hired men, showing me more compassion than she had in years. Tom lowered the rifle just a hair. If you're telling the truth, then you'd better give us more than words. What exactly are they planning? The man glanced over his shoulder, as if expecting someone to leap from the shadows. His voice dropped. They'll hit you when you're alone. Late at night. Burn the ranch down so there's no trace. They don't care if you scream, if you beg. They'll make sure no one finds you. My breath caught. The thought of George's ranch, our life's work, burning with me trapped inside, it was unbearable. The man took a step back toward his car. Leave while you can. Tonight. Don't wait. But I shook my head, gripping George's locket around my neck. No. This is my home. My husband built this with his hands. I won't run. The man gave me one last look, half pity, half respect. Then he slipped into his car and drove off into the night, his taillights vanishing down the dirt road. Silence hung heavy on the porch. Finally Tom spoke. Mrs. Johnson, this ain't just threats anymore. They're planning war. And if you won't leave, then we'd best get ready to fight. I nodded, though fear clawed at my chest. We'll fight, Tom. We'll fight with everything we've got. Because if Linda wants this ranch, she'll have to walk through fire to take it. But deep down I knew. Fire was exactly what she was bringing. The scarred man's warning haunted me every second after he left. 3 nights. 3 nights until Linda unleashed professionals. Killers, arsonists, whoever she had found to finish what she and her thugs couldn't. I didn't sleep. I sat in the rocking chair with the shotgun across my lap, staring at the dark outline of the barn through the window. Every groan of the old house, every brush of the wind through the trees felt like footsteps closing in. Tom stayed by my side. He moved with a quiet urgency I'd never seen in him before. He wasn't just the ranch hand anymore. He was a soldier preparing for battle. We'll fortify, he said the next morning, his voice gruff as he laid tools across the kitchen table. If they're coming, we'll be ready. You're not going down without a fight, Mrs. Johnson. I swallowed hard, looking at the nails, planks, and barbed wire he'd hauled in from the barn. Tom, I don't want blood spilled on this land. Not if it can be helped. He looked me square in the eyes. Better theirs than yours. We spent the day preparing. The ranch, once a place of peace and memories, turned into a fortress. Tom reinforced the doors with steel plates he found in the shed. He boarded up the weaker windows. We strung barbed wire along the back fence and set up floodlights that would blind anyone sneaking in under the cover of night. Every angle they try, we'll see 'em, Tom muttered as he tightened bolts with a wrench. I tried to help, though my hand shook more than I wanted him to see. I carried nails, held planks steady, even fetched water while he worked. But inside, my heart broke a little with every hammer strike. This wasn't the ranch George and I had built. It was turning into a battlefield. When the sun went down, Tom brought out 2 rifles and placed them on the table. One for me. One for you. I shook my head. I've never fired one at a person before. His face was grim. Then you'd better be ready to if it comes to that. That night as I lay in bed I thought about Linda. My Linda. The little girl who used to braid wildflowers into her hair. Who begged George to let her ride the ponies even before she was tall enough to reach the stirrups. The same girl who had once crawled into my bed after nightmares whispering, "Don't let the monsters get me, Mama." Now she was the monster. Tears slid down my cheeks into the pillow. I prayed, not just for my safety but for her soul. The next day was eerily quiet. Too quiet. The scarred man had said 3 nights. But that didn't mean Linda wouldn't strike earlier. I stayed close to Tom as he worked outside, patching holes in the fences, setting up cans and bells on wires that would rattle if someone crossed them. "Old trick from back in my granddaddy's day," he explained. "Cheap but effective." I forced a smile. "Smart man, your granddaddy." But inside my chest was tight with dread. By afternoon, Mr. Douglas arrived. His car rolled up the driveway, kicking up a trail of dust. He climbed out, carrying a briefcase. His face was serious but kind. "I came as soon as I heard," he said, taking off his hat. "Margaret, this is dangerous. You can't face this alone. I've filed protective orders, notified the sheriff, even arranged for extra patrols. But Linda's reckless. She won't care about the law. You need more than papers, you need protection." I told him about the scarred man, about the warning of professionals. His face paled. "Then it's worse than I thought." Tom crossed his arms. "We'll hold them off if they come." Douglas frowned. "Holding them off is one thing. Surviving them is another." He leaned closer to me. "Margaret, I need you to think carefully. If you stay here, you're putting your life on the line. But if you leave, even temporarily, we could buy time until the sheriff's men catch her." I shook my head firmly. "If I leave, Linda wins. She'll burn this ranch to the ground before I ever return. I can't abandon George's legacy." Douglas sighed, clearly torn. "Then you must be ready for the storm. And Margaret, if it comes to it, you must use that paper we activated. If she comes here demanding, waving her hands, claiming rights, you have the law on your side. Don't forget that." I nodded, but deep down, I knew Linda wasn't coming with papers anymore. She was coming with fire. The second night crawled by. Every hour felt like a lifetime. Tom kept patrol, walking the perimeter with his rifle, his boots crunching softly on the dirt. I sat inside, clutching the shotgun, whispering prayers into the silence. But nothing happened. No cars. No sados. Only the wind and the cry of coyotes in the distance. When dawn broke, relief washed over me, but it was short-lived, because it meant one thing. The third night was coming. That day, I couldn't eat. Couldn't rest. My hands trembled so much I nearly dropped George's old coffee cup. Tom noticed. He set his rifle against the wall and sat across from me at the table. "You're tougher than you think, Mrs. Johnson. You've lived through storms, droughts, losses. You can live through this too." I smiled weakly. "Tom, you sound like George." He chuckled softly. "That's about the highest compliment I've ever gotten." Even in the shadow of danger, his words gave me a sliver of strength. As the sun set, painting the horizon blood red, we prepared. Tom checked every rifle, every trap, every light. I walked the halls, touching the walls, the photos, the furniture, memorizing everything, just in case it was the last time I'd see it. By the time darkness fell, the ranch was silent, waiting. Then, just past midnight, the dogs started barking. Fierce, desperate. Tom rushed to the window, rifle in hand. "They're here." I felt my heart drop into my stomach. And then the first floodlight snapped on, triggered by movement. Shadows danced across the fence line. Figures, at least 3, maybe 4, moving fast, crouched low. The war Linda promised had arrived. Tom cocked his rifle. "Stay low, Margaret." But before I could even respond, a bottle came sailing through the night sky, flames trailing behind it. It smashed against the barn wall, bursting into fire. I screamed as flames climbed the wood. Tom fired a warning shot into the air. "Back off," he shouted. But the shadows didn't retreat. They advanced. And that was when I saw her, Linda, standing just beyond the fence, her face lit by the fire, Her smile twisted in triumph. "Burn it all," she screamed. "Burn it to the ground." The flames roared higher, smoke choking the air. The ranch I loved being devoured before my eyes. And as I clutched the shotgun tighter, my heart breaking, one truth slammed into me harder than the fire, harder than the fear. This wasn't just about saving land anymore. This was about survival. The fire roared like a beast unleashed, climbing the barn walls and lighting the night sky orange. Sparks flew into the wind, threatening to carry the blaze to the house. The smell of burning hay and wood filled my lungs, choking me with memories. George stacking bales, laughing as the horses stomped impatiently nearby. Now it was all going up in smoke. "Stay back," Tom shouted, firing another shot into the air. The shadows didn't flinch. These weren't scared drifters, they were trained. One darted toward the side of the barn, tossing another flaming bottle. Another raised a weapon, aiming toward the house. I dropped low behind the window, clutching the shotgun so tight my hands ached. My heart thundered in my ears. I wanted to scream, to beg them to stop, but Linda's voice cut through the chaos. "Don't waste time. Get her out." The men advanced, their movements quick and precise. They weren't just here to scare me. They were here to drag me out of my home. Tom ducked behind the porch post, returning fire. Bullets sparked off the metal plates he had installed earlier. "Mrs. Johnson," he yelled. "Get to the back room. Now." But my eyes locked on Linda. She stood beyond the fence, arms crossed, her face glowing in the firelight. She didn't move, didn't flinch. She just watched, as if she were already the queen of ashes. Rage burned hotter than the flames inside me. I pushed myself up, gripping the shotgun, and shouted through the crackling fire and gunshots. "Linda, you'll never have this ranch. Not while I'm breathing." Her smirk widened. "Then maybe you shouldn't be breathing." Another explosion rocked the barn as the roof caved in, sparks shooting high. Horses screamed in the distance, and my heart nearly broke. Tom grabbed my arm, dragging me toward the back. "We can't hold them forever. If they breach the house." But before he could finish, the front floodlight burst into sparks, shot out by one of the attackers. Darkness swallowed half the yard. The men shouted to each other, closing in. I heard boots pounding against the porch, heavy and fast. Tom raised his rifle, his jaw set. "It's the house they're after. And you, Mrs. Johnson. Get ready." The doorknob rattled. Then came a loud crash as the door shook under a battering blow. I lifted the shotgun, my hands trembling but steady enough to aim. The house groaned under the siege, the air thick with smoke and fear. And in that instant I knew this was it. The fight for my life, for George's legacy. For every memory tied to the land we built. The door cracked again. Wood splintered. They were coming in. The crash of wood splitting filled the air as the front door shook under the pounding force. My breath came shallow, quick. My knees wanted to give out, but my grip on the shotgun steadied me. "Stay low," Tom shouted, sliding against the wall, rifle ready. The doorknob rattled violently again, then silence, an eerie pause, as though the men outside wanted us to think they had gone. Smoke from the barn fire curled under the door, mingling with the smell of gunpowder. My throat burned. Then, with a deafening crack, the door burst inward. The first man through was broad-shouldered, his face covered by a dark scarf. He raised a pistol, but before he could aim, Tom's rifle barked. The man dropped, his weapon clattering against the floorboards. Another leapt over him, moving with frightening speed. I raised the shotgun, my fingers stiff on the trigger. The blast tore through the hallway, the recoil slamming my shoulder. The attacker screamed, clutching his arm, and stumbled back out the door. "Good shot," Tom shouted, already swinging to cover the window as glass shattered and a third figure tried to crawl through. His bullet found its mark. The man tumbled halfway through the window before going still, hanging like a broken doll. My heart thundered. The sound of my own breathing filled my ears. This was no longer preparation. This was war, right inside my home. Outside, Linda's voice shrieked through the smoke and fire. "Push harder. She's an old woman. Don't let her scare you." Old woman. That cut deeper than the smoke in my chest. She thought age made me weak, powerless. She thought years of living and working this land meant nothing. Rage gave me strength. I stepped closer to the doorway, pointing the shotgun into the night. "Linda, you come in here yourself if you want it so badly." She didn't move. She just stood there, arms folded, watching her men take the bullets for her. Another figure sprinted across the yard, crouching low. He hurled a flaming rag into the side window. Curtains caught fire instantly, smoke pouring into the living room. Tom cursed, grabbed a blanket, and smothered the flames before they spread. "They're trying to smoke us out," he growled. I coughed, blinking through the haze. "We can't let them win, Tom. This ranch is all I have left." He looked at me, sweat streaking his face, soot smudged on his jaw. "And you're all it's got left. If they get through, you fight. You hear me? Don't hesitate." Another crash came from the back door. They were trying to flank us. We moved quickly. Tom rushed to cover the rear, while I stayed near the front. My hands shook so hard I almost dropped the shotgun. But when the back door gave way, and 2 men charged in, Tom fired with deadly precision. One fell instantly. The other, wild-eyed, swung a crowbar at him. "Tom!" I screamed. Tom staggered back, the crowbar narrowly missing his head. I lifted the shotgun, aimed and pulled the trigger. The man flew backward, crashing into the stove. Pots clattered to the ground as his body went limp. Tom looked at me, chest heaving. "Save my hide again." But there was no time for relief. The barn outside collapsed fully, flames roaring into the sky, sparks raining across the yard. The heat pressed against the windows like a giant's breath. And in the flicker of firelight, I saw her, Linda, standing taller now, her smirk gone, her face hard. She raised a megaphone she must have taken from one of her men. "This is your last chance, Mama. Come out now, hand me the deed, and I'll let you live." I froze. Her voice was the same voice that once called me Mama after scraped knees and broken hearts. Now it was sharp, cruel, dripping with hate. "Never." I shouted back, my throat raw. "You'll take this ranch over my dead body." She sneered. "So be it." Her men regrouped, shouting commands to one another. I could see more shadows moving in the smoke, more than before. She had brought more than 4 or 5. At least a dozen remained. Tom cursed under his breath. "She won't stop until one of us is dead." The lights flickered. The fire outside grew louder. My home groaned as if it too knew its end was near. And then came a new sound. A deep rumble in the distance. Engines. At first I thought it was more of Linda's men. But the beams of headlights pierced through the smoke from the road. Several vehicles roared up the driveway. Linda turned startled as 3 sheriff's trucks barreled toward the ranch, sirens wailing. Relief surged through me so strong I nearly dropped to my knees. Douglas had kept his word. He had sent help.
Linda shouted her men.
"Scatter! Scatter now!" But the deputies poured out of the trucks, weapons drawn, barking commands. "Drop your weapons! Hands in the air!" Chaos erupted. Some of Linda's hired men threw down their guns and fled into the darkness. Others exchanged fire with the deputies, but they were quickly outnumbered. Linda, though, she didn't run. She stood at the fence, fury twisting her features, her eyes locked on me. "This isn't over, Mama!" she screamed, her voice breaking with rage. "You haven't seen the last of me." Deputies rushed toward her, but she bolted into the night, vanishing into the trees before they could grab her. The house was a wreck. The barn smoldered, half destroyed. My hand shook as I lowered the shotgun, the weight of it suddenly too much to bear. Tom placed a hand on my shoulder. "You're safe now. For tonight at least." I looked out at the chaos, the flashing lights, the smoke, the men in handcuffs being dragged away. Safe, maybe for the moment, but Linda was still out there. And I knew she wouldn't rest until she took everything from me. And deep inside, a question began to gnaw at me. How far would my own daughter go to see me ruined? The night ended with the flashing red and blue lights of the sheriff's trucks painting the ranch in harsh colors. Smoke curled from the ruined barn, and the acrid stench of fire clung to the air. Deputies moved about, cuffing the men who hadn't managed to escape. Others took photographs, spoke into radios, and marked the scene with tape. I sat on the porch steps, shotgun across my knees, too numb to move. My body trembled, not from the chill of night but from the storm that had passed through my home. Sheriff Harris, a tall man with tired eyes, approached me. He removed his hat, his voice low. Mrs. Johnson, you're lucky to be alive. Your daughter, she's gone for now, but she'll resurface. A woman like her doesn't back down easy. I swallowed hard. My throat was raw from smoke, but I forced out the words. This ranch has survived storms, floods, and droughts. But I never thought I'd have to survive my own blood. The sheriff glanced toward the smoldering barn. We'll station deputies nearby for the next few days. Still, I'd advise you to stay with relatives or in town until she's caught. I shook my head firmly. This land is all I have. If I leave, she'll win. And I won't give her that. Douglas arrived then, rushing toward me with his briefcase still in hand. His face softened when he saw I was unharmed. Margaret, thank heavens you're safe. But you must understand, Linda won't stop. She knows the law isn't on her side anymore, so she's turned to force. That makes her twice as dangerous. Tom stood nearby, leaning on his rifle like a sentry. Then we'll be ready for her again. I looked at both men, Douglas with his legal armor, Tom with his quiet strength, and realized I wasn't as alone as I had felt. Still, the weight in my chest pressed down. My daughter had become my enemy. As the deputies loaded the last of the arrested men into trucks, Linda's voice echoed in my mind. This isn't over, Mama. And I knew she meant it. The sheriff gave me a long look before walking away. We'll find her. But you need to prepare yourself. Family or not, she's chosen her path. I nodded, though my heart broke at the truth. When the last of the flashing lights disappeared down the road, silence returned to the ranch. The fire was out, but the scars remained. Tom sat beside me on the porch. You fought hard tonight, Mrs. Johnson. Harder than most would have. I sighed, staring out at the blackened ruins of the barn. And yet, somehow, I feel like the fight has only just begun. Morning broke heavy over the ranch, not with the peaceful golden glow I had always loved, but with a gray haze of smoke that still drifted from the barn ruins. The smell of char lingered, bitter and suffocating, like a scar I couldn't wash away. I stood by the fence with a cup of black coffee in my hand, staring at the land George and I had worked so hard for. Half of it looked wounded now, splintered wood, blackened beams, scorched earth. Tom came up beside me, quiet as always. He had dark circles under his eyes, though I knew he hadn't closed them all night. He set his hat back on his head and exhaled slowly. She'll be back. I didn't need him to explain who she was. I heard Linda's last words every time I closed my eyes. This isn't over, Mama. I tightened my grip on the cup, the heat searing my palm. Then we'll be ready again. Tom nodded, but I could tell his mind was restless. He didn't believe reinforcements and barbed wire would hold her forever. And neither did I. By mid-morning, people from town began arriving. Some came with casseroles, others with blankets or offers to help rebuild. The attack had spread like wildfire through the community. Neighbors who rarely stepped onto my property now stood on my porch, their voices hushed, their eyes darting around as if Linda might leap out of the trees. Margaret, old Mrs. Henderson whispered, clutching her shawl tight. Is it true? Your own daughter did this. I nodded, though it hurt to admit. Yes, it was Linda. She brought men with her. Dangerous men. The crowd murmured. Some shook their heads in pity. Others looked at me with something colder. Fear, maybe even judgment. It was one thing to lose a barn to a storm, another to have it torched by your own blood. Sheriff Harris showed up again around noon, his deputies canvassing the woods nearby. He tipped his hat at me. We've put out word for Linda's arrest. Her men that we caught won't talk, but one of them had papers in his truck. Looks like they'd been paid up front. She's using whatever money she's still got to hire these fellas. Douglas stood on the porch steps, arms crossed. And she'll keep doing it as long as she has resources. Margaret, we must cut off her access to funds. That means freezing accounts, blocking transfers, anything tied to her name. I rubbed my temple. She already stole more than enough from me when George passed. If she's still got a stash hidden, she'll use every cent to destroy me. The sheriff adjusted his belt. That's what worries me. A woman with nothing to lose is more dangerous than one with riches. Later that afternoon, I drove into town with Douglas. I hated leaving the ranch, but I had to show people I wasn't beaten. As we pulled up to the courthouse, whispers followed us. Women paused in their shopping, Men stopped leaning against storefronts. That's her. I heard someone mutter. That's the one whose daughter tried to kill her. Another voice. Can you imagine? Your own flesh and blood. Their stares burned hotter than the barn fire had. Shame, anger, grief, they all tangled in my chest. I wanted to shout that it wasn't my fault, that I'd raised Linda with love, that I'd given her everything I could. But their eyes already held judgment. Inside the courthouse, Douglas filed motion after motion. He froze Linda's accounts, secured further restraining orders, and updated the sheriff on her known associates. I sat on the hard bench, hands folded, eyes staring at the floor tiles. When we walked back out, Douglas touched my arm. Margaret, I know this weighs heavy on you, but you must understand. Your community needs to see you strong. If they sense weakness, they'll side with the one who looks powerful, even if that's Linda. I stopped dead in the street, anger flaring. She burned my barn, sent killers after me, and they'd still side with her? He sighed. Money blinds people. Promises blind them too. Linda knows how to twist hearts. The words cut deep, because they were true. Linda had always been charming when she wanted to be, her smile disarming, her voice sweet as honey. She could lure people in and turn them against me with ease. That night back at the ranch, Tom fried eggs while I sat silent at the kitchen table. The house still smelled faintly of smoke, but I tried to pretend it was just another ordinary evening. You think she'll strike again soon? I asked. Tom slid a plate in front of me. She's regrouping. Mark my words, she won't quit. But she'll want to come harder next time. She hates losing. I poked at the eggs with my fork, my appetite gone. Then she'll destroy everything before she ever stops. Tom leaned forward, eyes sharp. Not if we destroy her plans first. You've got to be one step ahead of her. Whatever she's planning, we cut her off before she gets there. His words planted a seed of thought in me. I had always been on the defensive, waiting for Linda to attack. But maybe it was time I stopped waiting. Maybe it was time to strike first. The next morning, Sheriff Harris returned, his face drawn tight. He carried a folder thick with papers. We've got news, he said grimly. Linda's been sighted. My heart skipped. Where? Up in Mill Creek. She's been staying with some rough folks out there. Word is she's trying to buy explosives. The room went silent. Even Tom froze in his chair. Explosives. I felt the blood drain from my face. She means to blow the house? Douglas paled. Or worse. If she can't have the ranch, she'll level it, and you with it. I gripped the edge of the table until my knuckles turned white. Then we can't wait for her to come to me again. The sheriff nodded. I was hoping you'd say that. We've got a team ready to move, but we'll need your cooperation. If you're willing, we can use the deed as bait. Draw her out where we can control the ground. Douglas shook his head. That's dangerous. She's already tried to kill Margaret twice. I stood straighter than I had in days. And she'll keep trying until one of us is gone. Sheriff, I'll do it. I'll help you trap her. Tom looked at me, worry in his eyes. Mrs. Johnson. But I cut him off. I've lived too long to cower now. If my daughter wants war, then war she'll get. But this time, I won't be the one hiding behind locked doors. The sheriff gave me a long, steady look. Then he slid the folder across the table. Then let's plan it right. Because if she gets one step ahead of us, you won't survive the next round. I opened the folder, my hands trembling. Inside were maps, surveillance photos, and notes on Linda's movements. Each page felt like another nail in the coffin of the girl I once rocked to sleep. But as I studied them, something hardened in me. Linda wasn't my daughter anymore. She was an enemy. And if it came down to her or me, I already knew my choice. We drove the plan over and over like men rehearsing a play. Sheriff Harris laid it out clear and sharp. We'll make it look like you're alone and vulnerable. We'll let word leak that the deed is back on the table. She'll come for it. When she does, we move in. His eyes were steady, the kind of steadiness that had calmed me the night the door came crashing in. Tom and I went through every detail. Where I would sit on the porch, what time I would leave the house for the store, which windows would be left unlocked for appearance's sake. Douglas handled the legal bait. A certified copy of the deed, made to look like the only original, deliberately placed where anyone could find it. The sheriff's men would hide, radios muted, dogs on long tethers. I felt like I was part of a trap, and that thought made my stomach churn, but I also felt oddly empowered. For the first time in months, I wasn't entirely waiting for the next blow to fall. If she's desperate enough to buy explosives, Harris said, she's going to move fast. We'll set the perimeter and watch the road. If she comes with anyone, we take them. If she comes alone, well, we'll have to be ready for her to run. You want me to be bait? I said. The word tasted like iron in my mouth. It felt wrong to play the part of the helpless old woman again, but the truth was I'd practiced helplessness enough to be convincing. Here, though, the helplessness would be a costume. Under it, I would be fierce. When night came, the house looked so ordinary I could almost breathe. I sat under the porch light with a blanket over my knees, the false deed tucked in plain sight on the table beside me. Tom sat a chair away, his rifle propped against his leg. The sheriff's deputy was parked down by the road, engine humming so the headlights could flash if need be. 2 more men crouched behind the hedgerow like hunters. Douglas said a quiet prayer, and I held George's locket in my palm until the metal warmed. Hours crawled by. Criquet. The moon hung thin. Every car that drove by made my pulse jump. I told myself stories about the little girl Linda once was to stop the dread from climbing too high in my throat. She used to hide under the table and giggle when I found her. She used to bring me wildflowers. That memory felt like a different life. Then, just past midnight, headlights cut through the trees. 2 cars, fast, clean, and moving with purpose. My body flooded with adrenaline. Tom whispered, "Get down," and I pressed low into the wicker chair, my heart hammering so hard I could feel it in my jaw. A shadow moved at the edge of the yard. Footsteps. The metal scrape of something being set down. I peered through the smoke-smeared glass and saw them. 3 figures, their faces obscured by hoods. One knelt by the gate and began smoothing the earth with gloved hands. Another carried a metal case. The third stood watch, head turning like a sentinel. My breath hitched. The case clanged open. Inside, my worst fear made real, were canisters and coiled fuses. The man with the case bent to set something near the fence post, working with the precise efficiency of professionals. I wanted to move, to shout, to run, but I held still and gripped the locket until my fingers ached. Then, without warning, the man standing at the gate reached into his pocket and flipped a small switch. A short, sharp hiss filled the night, and the world exploded. The explosion ripped through the night like thunder cracking the earth open. My ears rang so hard I couldn't hear myself scream. The porch shuddered beneath me, boards rattling loose, windows shaking in their frames. Splinters of wood and shards of glass shot through the air like knives. I hit the ground, the breath knocked from my lungs, clutching the shotgun I'd laid by my chair. The smoke was thick, acrid, searing my throat as I coughed and blinked through the haze. Tom was beside me in an instant, his body shielding mine, shouting something I couldn't hear over the ringing in my ears. The yard was chaos. The fence had been blown apart, jagged posts jutting up like broken teeth. Flames licked at the grass where the blast had scorched the earth. The 3 hooded figures scattered, 2 darting toward the shadows, the third still clutching that metal case. And then I saw her. Linda. She stepped from the second car, her silhouette framed by the glow of fire. No hood, no mask, just her face twisted in triumph. My heart clenched. For a moment, through the ringing and smoke, she looked like the little girl who used to run barefoot through the grass. But that illusion shattered when she raised her hand and pointed straight at me. "Get her," she screamed. Her voice tore through the smoke like a whip. Tom swung up his rifle and fired a warning shot. The bullet kicked up dirt inches from the hooded man's feet. "Stay back," he roared. But they didn't listen. One of them sprinted toward the porch, knife gleaming in his hand. I stumbled to my feet, shotgun shaking in my grip. My vision tunneled, narrowing to that knife, that running figure, the pounding of my heart. I pulled the trigger. The blast echoed through the night, louder even than the explosion. The man crumpled mid-stride, the knife clattering uselessly against the dirt. My hands trembled violently, my chest heaving. I had never killed before. But in that moment, survival left me no choice. Linda's scream pierced the air. "You'll pay for that, Mama." Her words sliced through me. Mama. Even now, in her fury, she called me that. I didn't know whether to weep or rage. The sheriff's trap snapped shut then. From the hedgerows and ditches, deputies surged forward, rifles raised, flashlights blazing. Sheriff's Department. Drop your weapons. Gunfire erupted, sharp cracks cutting through the night. The hooded men scattered like wolves, some firing back, others fleeing into the dark. Linda bolted toward her car, skirts whipping around her legs. Don't let her get away. I screamed, my voice raw. Tom vaulted off the porch, sprinting toward the car. But Linda was fast, faster than I remembered, driven by pure hatred. She dove behind the wheel, the engine roaring to life. The car lurched forward, wheels spitting gravel. One deputy fired at the tires. The shot rang out true. The back wheel blew, rubber shredding. Linda swerved, the car skidding sideways before slamming into the fence post with a sickening crunch. The hood buckled, steam hissing from the engine. Deputies surrounded the wreck, shouting commands. Hands up. Step out of the vehicle. But Linda didn't surrender. She flung the door open and stumbled out, pistol in hand, eyes blazing wild. She aimed straight at me. Time slowed. I saw her finger tighten on the trigger. Her lips twisted in rage. My body froze, fear and heartbreak colliding in my chest. This was my daughter. The child I had nursed, bathed, sung lullabies to. Now she was raising a gun to kill me. Then Tom tackled her from the side, his body slamming into hers like a bull. The pistol fired, the bullet whizzing past my ear so close I felt the heat of it. Linda shrieked, thrashing against him like a wildcat. Deputies swarmed in, forcing her to the ground, wrenching the gun from her grip. She screamed curses, spitting like an animal. You traitors! She stole everything from me. She doesn't deserve a dime. Her voice cracked, shrill with madness. Tears streaked down her soot-stained face. Mama, you don't understand. That money should have been mine. George owed me. He always loved you more than me. The words tore into me deeper than any bullet could. My knees gave way, and I sank onto the porch steps, shaking. Sheriff Harris shoved the pistol into his belt and snapped cuffs around Linda's wrists. Linda Johnson, you're under arrest for attempted murder, arson, conspiracy, and unlawful use of explosives. But Linda didn't stop fighting. Her eyes locked on me as the deputies dragged her toward the truck. This isn't the end. I'll never stop, Mama. Never. You'll regret crossing me until the day you die. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. I could only sit there, watching as the child I had once cradled in my arms was shoved into the back of a police truck, her screams echoing into the night. The deputies hauled off the remaining attackers, leaving only silence and smoke behind. The ranch was battered, broken, scarred. But still standing. Tom walked back to me, his face pale, his shirt torn where Linda had clawed him. He lowered himself onto the steps beside me, his voice gentle. It's over, Mrs. Johnson. She's in custody now. She can't hurt you anymore. I shook my head slowly, tears burning my eyes. It's not over. Not while she still hates me. That kind of hate doesn't end with handcuffs. Tom placed a hand on mine, grounding me. Then we'll face it together. Whatever comes next. I looked at the ruined yard, the shattered fence, the smoldering earth where the explosion had torn through. My heart ached, but deep down I knew Tom was right. I had survived the storm, but the clouds still lingered on the horizon. The morning after the explosion, the ranch was eerily quiet. Smoke still curled from the scorched earth, and the broken fence sagged like an old soldier after battle. I sat on the porch with a blanket around my shoulders, staring at the wreckage. My body felt heavy, but my mind raced with every word Linda had hurled at me. Mama, you don't understand. He loved you more than me. By noon, news of her arrest had spread through town like wildfire. The grocery clerk looked at me differently when I walked in, whispering to a neighbor. At the diner, I caught fragments of conversations. Her own daughter? Explosives, can you believe it? That old lady must have been hiding something. It stung more than I wanted to admit. The victim always ends up painted with someone else's brush. I wanted to stand on a table and shout that I wasn't the villain, that I had only tried to protect what was mine. But instead, I kept quiet, pushing my cart past judgmental stares, holding my head high though my heart trembled. Sheriff Harris stopped by that evening. His voice was steady, but his eyes carried the weight of bad news. She's not talking, Margaret. Not to me, not to the investigators. And she's already asking for high-powered lawyers. This fight isn't over. I nodded slowly. I had expected as much. Linda had always been stubborn, even as a child. Now that stubbornness had hardened into steel. After he left, I stood alone in the kitchen, clutching George's locket. My reflection in the window looked older than I remembered, every line carved deeper by worry. Why, Linda? I whispered. What did I do so wrong? There was no answer. Only the groan of the wind against the battered shutters. But I made myself a promise that night. Whatever storm still lingered, whatever courtroom battles or whispered lies lay ahead, I would not bow. I had survived her rage. I would survive her schemes too. Because I had one thing Linda had long since lost. The truth. The courthouse smelled of old wood and polished floors, the kind of smell that reminded me of funerals, solemn, heavy, suffocating. I clutched George's locket in my palm as I stepped inside, Tom steadying me with a hand on my elbow. My daughter was on trial for trying to kill me. The thought alone should have broken me. But by then I'd learned that sorrow only dulls when it hardens into resolve. The courtroom was packed. Reporters filled the benches, their pens scratching like rats in the walls. Town folks craned their necks, eager for a glimpse of the ranch case, as the newspapers had named it. I caught whispers as I walked past. That's the mother. She must have done something. Imagine your own child trying to blow you up. I held my head high. Let them whisper. I was here for the truth. Then they brought Linda in. Her hair was combed, her clothes neatly pressed, but her eyes were wild. She scanned the room until she found me, and the smirk that spread across her face cut deeper than any knife. She didn't look ashamed. She looked ready for battle. The judge called the court to order, and the trial began. Douglas stood at our table, his presence calm and steady. He laid out the case. The explosives, the armed men, Linda's threats caught on police body cams. He showed the jury photographs of the blasted fence, the mangled car. Every word was a nail hammered into the coffin of her defense. But Linda had money. And with money came lawyers. Her attorney, a slick man named Reed, painted her as the victim of an overbearing, greedy mother who had manipulated her inheritance. He twisted facts until even I began to doubt my own memory. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," he said, pacing with theatrical flair. My client was pushed aside, her rightful share of the estate stolen. She was desperate, yes, but not a criminal. A daughter's cry for fairness should not be mistaken for attempted murder. Fairness. That word almost made me laugh. Fairness would have been her visiting on Sundays, or calling me on Christmas, or not plotting to bury me under rubble. But the jury listened. They always listened to the performance. On the third day, Reed turned his fire on me. "Mrs. Johnson," he said smoothly, "you hold the deed to a ranch worth millions, as well as access to funds your late husband left behind. Isn't it true you live in luxury while your daughter struggled?" "Luxury?" I snapped, unable to contain myself. "Sir, I live in a wooden house with creaking floors. I wash my own dishes. I mend my clothes until the thread runs out. Luxury is not the life I lead." Gasps fluttered through the room, but Reed only smiled. "And yet, you denied your daughter any share of that wealth?" I lifted George's locket and held it up for all to see. "My husband left this ranch to me, not her. Me." His will was clear. His signature was clear. Linda had her own life, her own choices. She chose greed. And when she didn't get her way, she chose violence. The courtroom went silent. Even Reed faltered. But Linda didn't. She leapt to her feet, shackles clinking. "You liar. You took everything from me. You always loved him more than me." The judge banged his gavel. "Order. Ms. Johnson, sit down or be removed." Her words tore through me. Always loved him more than me. Could that truly be the root of all this? Jealousy? Resentment buried so deep it twisted into hate? Douglas leaned close. "It's time," he whispered. And that was when the moment from the lawyer's office all those months ago returned to me. The paper slid across the desk, the words that had made Linda turn white. "Your Honor," Douglas said, standing tall, With the court's permission, I'd like to submit into evidence the final clause of George Johnson's estate plan. Sealed and undisclosed until this trial. The judge raised a brow but nodded. Douglas unfolded the paper carefully, like a priest revealing scripture. He laid it flat for the jury and began to read. This clause states that in the event of hostile action taken by any heir against Margaret Johnson, the ranch and all financial assets tied to it are to be irrevocably transferred to a preservation trust. The beneficiary, the National Wildlife Foundation. Neither Margaret Johnson nor any heir may profit further. The room erupted. Voices shouted, reporters scribbled furiously. The judge pounded his gavel. Even I was stunned. George had prepared for this possibility, had foreseen greed tearing at the family, and written a safeguard. If Linda attacked me, she wouldn't just lose her claim, she would lose everything. Linda's face drained of color. No, that's not true. You forged that. You planted it. But Douglas had come armed. Your Honor, we have notarized copies, verified signatures, and witness testimony from the estate's original executor. This is authentic. The jury leaned forward, their eyes wide. For once, they saw her not as a desperate daughter but as what she was. A woman who had gambled her soul and lost. Linda sagged in her chair, all fight gone. She looked at me across the courtroom, and for the first time, I saw not rage but something worse, emptiness. The verdict came swiftly. Guilty on all counts. When the judge read her sentence, 25 years in federal prison, Linda didn't cry. She didn't scream. She only stared at me, her eyes hollow as deputies led her away. That stare would haunt me for the rest of my days. After the gavel fell, I stepped out into the sunlight, the courthouse steps crowded with reporters. They shouted questions, microphones thrust toward my face. Mrs. Johnson, how do you feel about your daughter's sentence? I paused, clutching the locket. My voice trembled, but I spoke from the deepest part of my heart. I feel sorrow. Not for myself, but for the little girl my daughter used to be. She lost her way, and greed destroyed her. Let this be a lesson. Money can build walls between families, but love is what keeps them standing. If you let greed in, you'll lose everything that matters. The crowd fell silent. Cameras clicked, pens scratched. But for me, the moment wasn't about headlines. It was about truth. Tom guided me away from the noise, back to the ranch. The fence would need rebuilding, the scars would remain, but the land was still mine. Untouched by greed, protected now by George's foresight. That night, as I sat by the window watching the stars, I whispered to the darkness, George, you saved me again. And to Linda, wherever she was, I whispered too. I pray someday you'll remember love. Viewers, thank you for staying with me through this story. My name is Margaret Johnson, 72 years old, speaking to you from Wyoming. If you've listened this far, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification button so you won't miss more stories like this one. And please tell me, from which part of the country are you watching? Because stories like mine are meant to be shared, not hidden. And maybe, just maybe, someone out there will hear this and choose love over greed before it's too late.